deep beneath the endless weight of the mountains, where light had never touched and silence reigned for ages. A small piece of coal lay hidden, pressed tightly between layers of ancient stone, surrounded by countless others just like it, all existing sem saber porque, all believing this darkness was the only reality they would ever know, unaware that time, pressure, and pain were quietly preparing something extraordinary. As years passed, the earth grew heavier, the heat intensified, and the pressure became almost unbearable, crushing many of the coals into dust, erasing their form, their presence, their story, while the small coal felt itself burning from the inside and thought that if it simply endured without change, it would disappear just like the rest, forgotten and meaningless, and in that moment of despair it made a silent decision that would change everything, deciding that it would not end as just another broken fragment lost in the dark, but that it would become something more, something eternal. Instead of resisting the force that threatened to destroy it, the coal surrendered to the pressure, allowing the heat to reshape its very essence, even as the pain felt endless and the transformation felt like death itself, because everything at once began to dissolve. And yet within that dissolution something stronger was forming, something clearer, something unbreakable, and over time, without warning, without celebration, the coal was no longer coal, but a diamond born in silence, forged, not despite the pressure but because of it. When the earth finally shifted and light reached it for the first time, the diamond realized that the same darkness that once imprisoned it had protected its growth. The same weight that tried to crush it had given it strength, and the same heat that nearly destroyed it had given it brilliance. But the journey was not over, because transformation never ends where comfort begins. Taken from the earth, the diamond passed through human hands, where sharp tools cut into its surface again and again, each cut painful, each strike seeming unnecessary. Yet with every incision it reflected more light, revealing facets that had been hidden inside all along, until it could finally shine in ways it never imagined when it was still buried in the dark. And as it stood reflecting light to the world, the diamond understood the truth it once feared, that change is not punishment, pain is not meaningless, and breaking is sometimes the only way to reveal who you truly are, because when life places pressure on you, it is not always trying to destroy you. Sometimes it is shaping you into something rare, something resilient, something unforgettable. So when life buries you under weight you think you cannot survive, remember the coal that became a diamond. Remember that what feels like the end is often the beginning of your becoming, and do not fear the pressure, do not fear the heat, do not fear the breaking, because only those who allow themselves to transform discover their true brilliance. Share this story with someone who feels buried, someone who feels crushed, someone who believes the darkness will never end, and once you've shared it, type "done" in the comments below, so together we can spread this message of hope, courage, and transformation. And as the diamond reflected the world around it, it began to understand that its brilliance was not meant only to be admired, but to remind others of what pressure can create when it is met with courage instead of fear, because far beneath the surface of every life, there are moments when the weight feels unbearable, when silence becomes suffocating, when darkness convinces the soul that nothing good can grow there. Yet it is precisely in those unseen depths that transformation is forged, slowly, painfully, invisibly, while the world above continues unaware. The diamond remembered what it once was, not with shame but with reverence, because without the fragility of coal, there could be no strength of diamond, without confusion there could be no clarity, without the long nights buried in uncertainty there could be no light worth reflecting, and in that realization it understood that every stage of becoming matters, even the ones that feel insignificant, even the ones that feel like failure, even the ones that feel like being forgotten. There were moments when the diamond wished it could speak, wished it could tell the world that it was not born shining, that it did not wake up one day strong and unbreakable, that its beauty was not a gift but a consequence of surviving pressure without losing its essence, of allowing change without surrendering its core, of trusting that the process knew what it was doing even when nothing made sense. And somewhere, far away, another piece of coal lay buried, feeling the same heat, the same pressure, the same fear of being erased, believing it was alone in its suffering, unaware that its pain was not a sentence but an invitation, not a punishment but a passage, not a sign of weakness but the beginning of strength, because life never reveals its intentions at the start. It only reveals the weight, the darkness, the discomfort, and waits to see who will endure long enough to be transformed. The diamond understood that many give up too soon, mistaking pressure for rejection, mistaking resistance for failure, mistaking breaking for the end, never realizing that the breaking is what opens space for something new to emerge, something stronger than what existed before, something capable of holding light without shattering, something capable of standing where it once could not survive. As time passed, the diamond watched humans chase light outside themselves, searching for meaning in noise, validation, and endless movement, rarely stopping long enough to realize that the most profound transformations happen in stillness, in silence, in the unseen depths where no applause exists, where no one is watching, where the soul is forced to confront itself without distractions. It wished it could whisper to them that growth is quiet, that becoming is lonely, that transformation rarely feels like progress while it is happening. Because while you are changing, you are shedding identities, expectations, illusions, and attachments that once felt like safety, and loss often disguises itself as regression when in truth it is making space for alignment. The diamond remembered the moment it stopped asking why and started trusting the process, the moment it surrendered the illusion of control and allowed the pressure to do its work, not because it was easy, but because resisting only prolonged the suffering, while acceptance allowed the transformation to complete itself, teaching that sometimes strength is not about fighting harder, but about yielding wisely. And if you are listening to this story right now, if life feels heavy, if pressure surrounds you from every side, if you feel buried beneath expectations, responsibilities, heartbreak, or uncertainty, remember that nothing extraordinary is formed without resistance, and nothing rare is created without time, because quick comfort creates fragile outcomes, while slow pressure creates permanence. You are not late, you are not broken, you are not failing, you are becoming, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it feels isolating, even if it feels endless, because transformation does not announce itself, it works silently, reshaping you from the inside until one day you realize you no longer respond to life the way you used to, no longer fear what once paralyzed you, no longer shrink where you once collapsed. And just like the diamond, your journey may not end when you finally emerge into the light, because life will continue to polish you, to refine you, to cut away what no longer serves your highest form. And yes, those moments will hurt too, but every refinement reveals more of your truth, more of your clarity, more of your strength, until you can reflect light not just for yourself, but for others who are still buried and searching for hope. So do not curse the pressure, do not resent the darkness, do not fear the heat, because they are not signs that life is against you. They are signs that life is working deeply within you, shaping you into something resilient, something rare, something capable of standing firm without losing its shine. Remember this when the weight feels unbearable. Remember the coal that became a diamond. Remember that what feels like destruction is often construction happening beneath the surface, and trust that one day, when the light finally reaches you, you will understand why you had to endure everything you did. If this story resonated with you, if it mirrored something you are living right now, share it with someone who feels buried, someone who feels crushed, someone who believes they are breaking beyond repair. Because sometimes all a soul needs is a reminder that pressure creates brilliance, and transformation is already happening, even when it cannot yet be seen. And when you've shared this message, type "done" in the comments below, so together we can remind the world that no one is buried by accident, and that every soul under pressure is simply being prepared to shine. And as the message continued to spread quietly from one heart to another, the diamond understood something even deeper, that its true purpose was never to be admired for its beauty, but to stand as silent proof that nothing meaningful is created without endurance, because the world is full of unfinished transformations, full of souls that cracked under pressure not because they were weak, but because they did not yet understand what the pressure was asking of them. The diamond watched generations pass, watched hands change, watched desires evolve, and yet the pattern remained the same: humans fearing discomfort, running from silence, mistaking ease for alignment, never realizing that the most painful chapters are often the ones rewriting the soul at its deepest level, carving wisdom where innocence once lived, carving discernment where naivety once trusted blindly. It remembered the moment when it stopped identifying as coal, even before it had become a diamond, because identity is not defined by the present form, but by the direction of becoming, and those who survive transformation learn early that you must believe in what you are becoming long before the world can see it, long before proof exists, long before the pain makes sense. There were nights, deep beneath the earth, when the coal felt forgotten by time itself, when no sound reached it, when no sign of progress appeared, when every moment felt identical to the last, and yet those were the moments when the transformation was most active, because growth does not happen on the surface, it happens in the core, reshaping structures too deep to be visible. And this is where many give up, not at the height of pain, but at the height of monotony, when nothing seems to change, when effort feels pointless, when endurance feels unrewarded, because patience is the final test before emergence, and only those who learn to endure stillness are allowed to move forward into their next form. The diamond realized that humans often romanticize transformation, imagining it as a sudden awakening, a burst of clarity, a dramatic breakthrough, when in truth it is slow, repetitive, exhausting, and deeply humbling, because it forces you to confront your limitations, your fears, your attachments, and your illusions of control again and again until surrender becomes wisdom rather than defeat. It understood that pressure does not ask for perfection. It asks for presence. It asks you to stay, to breathe, to remain conscious even when every instinct tells you to escape, because escaping pain may preserve comfort, but it delays becoming, while staying allows the process to finish what it started. And somewhere above the surface, someone listening to this story might feel seen for the first time, realizing that their exhaustion is not laziness, that their confusion is not failure, that their solitude is not abandonment but initiation, because every meaningful evolution begins with separation from the familiar, with the slow dismantling of what once felt safe. The diamond had learned that you cannot carry your old self into your new life, that every transformation requires a shedding, a release, a letting go of identities that once protected you but now restrict you, and this shedding often feels like loss because the ego mourns what the soul has already outgrown. It remembered how terrifying it felt to dissolve, how unnatural it felt to not recognize itself, how tempting it was to cling to what was familiar even when it was limiting, because the unknown always feels more dangerous than the known, even when the known is slowly destroying you. And yet, once the transformation completed, once clarity replaced compression, once strength replaced fragility, the diamond realized that the fear was never a warning. It was a threshold, guarding the entrance to the next version of itself, because fear does not appear to stop you. It appears to ask who you are willing to become. The diamond understood that resilience is not about hardness alone, but about coherence, about being so aligned internally that external pressure no longer fractures you, but integrates into your structure, making you stronger rather than scattered, clearer rather than confused. And as life continued to polish it through experience, through loss, through refinement, the diamond accepted that even brilliance must be maintained, that stagnation dulls even the brightest surfaces, and that growth is not a destination but a rhythm, a lifelong dialogue between resistance and surrender. So if you feel like life keeps testing you, cutting you, refining you beyond what feels necessary, understand that refinement only happens to what has value, that pressure is never wasted on what is disposable, and that the very intensity of your experience is evidence of your capacity to endure and transform. You were never meant to remain what you were when the journey began, and if you feel unrecognizable to your past self, that is not betrayal, it is evolution, because becoming more is not an act of rejection, it is an act of alignment with who you were always meant to be. And one day, when you stand where you once could not survive, when you breathe easily in places that once suffocated you, when you carry wisdom where you once carried fear, you will understand that every moment of pressure was shaping you for that exact position, that exact strength, that exact clarity. Until then, remain patient, remain conscious, remain present within the process, because nothing real is rushed, nothing rare is rushed, and nothing enduring is created without time, pressure, and faith in what cannot yet be seen. If the story is still with you, if it continues to echo inside you, share it with someone who feels unfinished, someone who feels overwhelmed, someone who believes they are breaking beyond repair, because sometimes all it takes to survive another day is the realization that you are not breaking, you are becoming. And when you've shared this message, type "done" in the comments below, not as an ending, but as a declaration that you choose transformation over fear, patience over panic, and becoming over comfort. Then, after emerging into the world, the diamond felt the lingering memory of the dark, a whisper of the silence it once called home, because growth never completely severs its past. It carries the imprint of the struggle as a secret map, a guide for every moment when life attempts to obscure the path forward, reminding the diamond, and those who witness it, that endurance has a voice, and even in brilliance, humility remains. It noticed how easily others dismissed the journey, How quickly the casual observer assumed that shining was effortless, forgetting that every facet reflected years of unseen work, every reflection a testament to trials endured and lessons absorbed, and the diamond wished the world could see not just its beauty but the depth of its becoming. The complexity hidden in what appears simple, the patience concealed behind every glimmer. The diamond learned that transformation is rarely appreciated while it is happening, because those who have not endured cannot comprehend the language of pressure, and those who have not suffered cannot recognize the intelligence encoded in persistence. So it stood quietly, allowing its existence to communicate the truth that greatness is not a gift, but an accumulation of moments survived, decisions made in defiance of fear, and trust placed in the invisible hands of time. And so, it observed the coals still buried, the ones that trembled beneath the same weight it once feared, knowing they did not yet understand that the very force they resisted was forming them, that every moment of doubt, every flicker of despair, every thought of futility was being folded into their eventual emergence, each layer of darkness sculpting clarity, each whisper of suffocation shaping endurance, each fracture forming the blueprint of brilliance. The diamond remembered what it once believed. That pressure was punishment, that heat was threat, that darkness was enemy, and it smiled inwardly at how misguided it had been, because only when it stopped resisting, only when it surrendered to the forces it could not control, did it discover that those forces were not adversaries but secret collaborators, guiding it toward what it was always meant to become, teaching that surrender is not weakness, but intelligence applied with courage. It wished it could reach down into the depths of the earth and touch the coals still trapped there, to whisper to them that the pain they feel is not evidence of failure, that the pressure they experience is not rejection, that the dark they endure is not absence, but preparation. A quiet forge that will one day reveal their light, not as a reward, but as inevitability, if only they endure long enough to be transformed. And the diamond realized that suffering is always relational, that pain is always formative, that what feels like isolation is often alignment, because the world does not give easy lessons to those unready to carry their knowledge, and the universe does not rush what must be built slowly. So every strike, every weight, every seemingly arbitrary moment of discomfort is a teacher, and every choice to continue is a graduation from the trial to the mastery of self. It remembered the human hands that had shaped it, that had cut into its surface with sharp instruments, and it understood that those too were part of the process, because refinement cannot happen without friction, because brilliance cannot manifest without interruption, because clarity cannot emerge without confrontation, and each scar left by the tool was a language of growth, a silent story carved into its essence, an invitation to recognize that perfection is never innate, but co-created, with resistance. And as it reflected sunlight across every angle, it discovered that the light it cast was not its own, but a reflection of all it had endured, a testimony to everything that had sought to compress, bend, and break it, a tribute to every moment it had refused to disappear. And in that reflection, it saw not just beauty, but meaning, not just brilliance, but purpose, because survival without transformation is a hollow existence, while endurance with metamorphosis carries an imprint of eternity. The diamond realized that pressure is universal, that every living soul experiences moments that threaten to shatter identity, that every being must confront the possibility of dissolution, and that the difference between those who remain ordinary and those who become extraordinary is not circumstance, but response, not control, but surrender, not avoidance, but willingness to inhabit discomfort long enough for it to give birth to strength. It thought of those who had given up, who had crumbled into dust, whose potential never emerged, and it mourned them silently, not with anger, but with reverence, because their stories, even in incompletion, contained lessons for those who would endure, and it understood that witnessing failure without succumbing to it is itself a form of resilience, a quiet courage, a recognition that survival alone is insufficient, but survival with transformation is transcendence. And the diamond began to perceive the rhythm of transformation, that nothing occurs in isolation, that the slow accumulation of pressure, heat, and repetition is a language the soul eventually understands, and that brilliance is less an event than a process, a continuum in which every moment of struggle, every sigh of exhaustion, every tremor of fear is a note in a symphony whose crescendo is patience, endurance, and ultimately emergence. It realized that humans fear being buried because they misunderstand what burial represents, seeing it as annihilation when it is actually incubation, mistaking suffocation for stagnation when it is actually preparation, believing that the absence of light is absence of life when it is actually an invisible crucible in which identity, clarity, and purpose are forged, and it longed for them to understand that darkness, weight, and heat are not adversaries, but allies in disguise. And the diamond knew that it had become a messenger, not by intention, but by consequence, that its mere existence broadcast a truth beyond words, that enduring, transforming, and shining against all odds is a language all beings can read if they learn to look, and that witnessing one transformation can inspire countless others to trust their own process, even in moments when hope seems absent, even when pain seems endless, even when life feels unrecognizable. It thought of the moment it first felt fear within the coal, the moment it believed it would crumble, the moment it longed for release from pressure, and it marveled at the irony that that very fear had been the doorway to its awakening, that every trembling, every whisper of doubt, every heartbeat in the dark had been guiding it toward the form it would one day inhabit, teaching that vulnerability is never weakness, but the raw material for strength, the catalyst for becoming. And as it reflected its light onto other stones, onto other surfaces, it began to see not just its own brilliance, but the latent brilliance of everything around it, realizing that transformation is contagious, that one emergence can illuminate countless unseen potentialities, that witnessing courage can spark courage, witnessing surrender can spark surrender, and witnessing endurance can spark endurance, so that even the smallest act of trust in the process contributes to a vast ripple of becoming. It understood that life's tools, though sometimes harsh, are deliberate, because cutting, striking, and compressing are the means by which hidden form is revealed, that suffering, loss, and frustration are the mechanisms of clarity, and that no diamond exists without the collaboration of forces far greater than itself, which is why humility is inseparable from brilliance, because recognition of the process gives meaning to the result, and gratitude transforms endurance into joy. The diamond remembered that there would always be coals left behind, untouched by light, unaware of their potential, and it wished for them a quiet patience, an inner knowing, a trust that though they cannot yet perceive the change, the forces at work are orchestrating an inevitable emergence, that every second of endurance carries a weight of possibility, that suffering has intention even when invisible, and that survival with understanding is the precursor to emergence with brilliance. And it realized that time itself is a sculptor, infinitely patient, infinitely precise, infinitely intelligent, and that while human eyes measure moments and demand immediate evidence, the earth, the pressure, the fire, and the passage of years operate on a scale that is invisible, intangible, and often incomprehensible, so that the work of becoming cannot be rushed, cannot be cheated, and cannot be seen in its fullness until the moment of revelation arrives. It marveled at the symmetry between coal and diamond, between darkness and light, between compression and emergence, and it understood that every stage of suffering has a purpose, that every trial, no matter how insignificant it seems, contributes to a coherent whole, that every loss, every failure, every night of fear is an integral part of the architecture of brilliance, and that nothing in life is wasted when it is met with endurance, awareness, and faith.